What's up, folks? I'm Dan, and welcome to I've Been Meaning to Read That, the show where I read books out loud that I've been meaning to read. Let's go. I'm not sure which part was more upsetting in the last few chapters of The Count of Monte Cristo. Was it the casual misogyny between Danglars and his wife, or between Debray and Madame Danglars? Just the, oh, you're lucky I let you have some money for walking around, woman. Or Debray thinking, women like to keep secrets. You know these women. You know them and their secrets. And they're just having a mood. You know how women have moods. I shouldn't be shocked, but I am. It is a book, written way back in the day. It reminds me of when I was doing research in college for my history final. I was writing a paper about pirates in the Mediterranean. I know, not as cool as the other seas, but there were pirates there, and I found an account from the 1500s of a guy who was captured by pirates who were North African and thus Muslim, and, he escaped from them, and he said, we were about to meet our compatriots at the getaway boat when one of our companions, the nefarious Jew, sold us out to the Turks, and we were captured again, which, the whole, we'll skip past the whole, calling any Muslim person a Turk, even though they're, hundreds of miles from Turkey and North Africa. But just to go, oh, you know what happened to me. It's not hard to guess. There was a Jew with us, and you know what he did. When you find just casual misogyny and racism in old stuff, it really just blows your hair back. I won't even get started on James Bond books. Woof. You know what I mean? All right, let's get back into probably the best chapter of The Count of Monte Cristo. Chapter 69, The Inquiry. Monsieur de Villefort kept the promise he had made to Madame Danglars to endeavor to find out how the Count of Monte Cristo had discovered the history of the house at Auteuil. He wrote the same day for the required information to Monsieur de Beauville, who, from having been an inspector of prisons, was promoted to a high office in the police, and the latter begged for 2 days' time to ascertain exactly who would be most likely to give him full particulars. At the end of the second day, Monsieur de Villefort received the following note. The person called the Count of Monte Cristo is an intimate acquaintance of Lord Wilmore, a rich foreigner, who is sometimes seen in Paris, and who is there at this moment. He is also known to the Abbé Busoni, a Sicilian priest, of high repute in the East, where he has done much good. Villefort replied by ordering the strictest inquiries to be made respecting these two persons. His orders were executed, and the following evening he received these details. The abbé, who was in Paris only for a month, inhabited a small 2-storied house behind Saint-Sulpice. There were 2 rooms on each floor, and he was the only tenant. The 2 lower rooms consisted of a dining room, with a table, chairs, and a sideboard of walnut, and a wainscoted parlor, without ornaments, carpet, or timepiece. It was evident that the abbé limited himself to objects of strict necessity. He preferred to use the sitting room upstairs, which was more library than parlor, and was furnished with theological books and parchments, in which he delighted to bury himself for months at a time, according to his valet. His valet looked at the visitors through a sort of wicket, and if their faces were unknown to him or displeased him, he replied that the abbé was not in Paris, an answer which satisfied most persons, because the abbé was known to be a great traveler. Besides, whether at home or not, whether in Paris or Cairo, the abbé always left something to give away, which the valet distributed through the wicket in his master's name. The other room near the library was a bedroom. A bed without curtains, 4 armchairs, and a couch, covered with yellow Utrecht velvet, composed all its furniture. Lord Wilmore resided in Rue Fontaine Saint-George. He was one of those English tourists who consume a large fortune in traveling. He hired the apartment in which he lived furnished, passed only a few hours in the day there, and rarely slept there. One of his peculiarities was never to speak a word of French, which he, however, wrote with great facility. The day after this important information had been given to the king's attorney, a man alighted from a carriage at the corner of the Rue Férou, and, rapping at an olive-green door, asked if the Abbé Busoni were within. "No, he went out early this morning," replied the valet. "I might not always be content with that answer," replied the visitor, "for I come from one to whom everyone must be at home. But have the kindness to give the Abbé Busoni—" "I told you he was not at home," repeated the valet. "Then on his return give him that card in this sealed paper. Will he be at home at 8 o'clock this evening?" "Doubtless, unless he is at work, which is the same as if he were out." "I will come again at that time," replied the visitor, who then retired. At the appointed hour the same man returned in the same carriage, which, instead of stopping this time at the end of the Rue Férou, drove up to the green door. He knocked, and it opened immediately to admit him. From the signs of respect the valet paid him, he saw that his note had produced a good effect. "Is the abbé at home?" asked he. "Yes, he is at work in his library, but he expects you, sir," replied the valet. The stranger ascended a rough staircase, and before a table, illuminated by a lamp whose light was concentrated by a large shade, while the rest of the apartment was in partial darkness, he perceived the abbé in a monk's dress, with a cowl on his head, such as was used by learned men of the Middle Ages. "Have I the honor of addressing the Abbé Busoni?" asked the visitor. "Yes, sir," replied the abbé. "And you are the person whom Monsieur de Beauville, formerly an inspector of prisons, sends to me from the prefect of police?" "Exactly, sir." "One of the agents appointed to secure the safety of Paris?" "Yes, sir," replied the stranger with a slight hesitation, and blushing. The abbé replaced the large spectacles, which covered not only his eyes but his temples, and, sitting down, motioned to his visitor to do the same. "I am at your service, sir," said the abbé with a marked Italian accent. "The mission with which I am charged, sir," replied the visitor, speaking with hesitation, "is a confidential one on the part of him who fulfills it, and him by whom he is employed." The abbé bowed. "Your probity," replied the stranger, "is so well known to the prefect that he wishes as a magistrate to ascertain from you some particulars connected with the public safety, to ascertain which I am deputed to see you. It is hoped that no ties of friendship or humane consideration will induce you to conceal the truth." "Provided, sir, the particulars you wish for do not interfere with my scruples or my conscience. I am a priest, sir, and the secrets of confession, for instance, must remain between me and the God, and not between me and the human justice." "Do not alarm yourself, monsieur. We will duly respect your conscience." At this moment the abbé pressed down his side of the shade, and so raised it on the other, throwing a bright light on the stranger's face, while his own remained obscured. "Excuse me, abbé," said the envoy of the prefect, "but the light tries my eyes very much." The abbé lowered the shade. "Now, sir, I am listening. Go on." "I will come at once to the point. Do you know the Count of Monte Cristo?" "You mean Monsieur Zaccone, I presume?" "Zaccone? Is not his name Monte Cristo?" "Monte Cristo is the name of an estate, or rather of a rock, not a family name." "Well, be it so. Let us not dispute about words, and since Monsieur de Monte Cristo and Monsieur Zaccone are the same—" "Absolutely the same." "Let us speak of Monsieur Zaccone." "Agreed." "I asked you if you knew him?" "Extremely well." "Who is he?" "The son of a rich shipbuilder in Malta." "I know that is the report, but, as you are aware, the police does not content itself with vague reports." "However," replied the abbé with an affable smile, "when that report is in accordance with the truth, everybody must believe it, the police as well as all the rest." "Are you sure of what you assert?" "What do you mean by that question?" Understand, sir, I do not in the least suspect your veracity. I ask if you are certain of it.
I knew his father, Monsieur Zaccone Senior.
Indeed?
And when a child I often played with the son in the timber yards.
But whence does he derive the title of Count?
You are aware that may be bought?
In Italy?
Everywhere.
And his immense riches, whence does he procure them?
They may not be so very great.
How much do you suppose he possesses?
From 150 to 200,000 livres per annum.
That's reasonable, said the visitor. I have heard he had 3 or 4 million.
200,000 per annum would make 4 millions of capital.
But I was told he had 4 millions per annum.
That is not probable.
Do you know this island of Monte Cristo?
Certainly. Everyone who has come from Palermo, Naples, or Rome to France by sea must know it, since he has passed close to it and must have seen it.
I'm told it's a delightful place.
It is a rock.
And why has the Count bought a rock?
For the sake of being a Count. In Italy, one must have territorial possessions to be a Count.
You have doubtless heard the adventures of Monsieur Zaccone's youth?
The father's?
No, the son's.
I know nothing is certain. At that period of his life, I lost the sight of my young comrade.
Was he in the wars?
I think he entered the service.
In what branch?
In the Navy.
Are you not his confessor?
No, sir. I believe he is a Lutheran.
A Lutheran?
I say, I believe such is the case. I do not affirm it. Besides, liberty of conscience is established in France.
Doubtless, and we are not now inquiring into his creed, but his actions, in the name of the prefect of police. I ask you what you know of him.
He is a man of a great charity. Our Holy Father, the Pope, has made him a Knight of Jesus Christ for the services he rendered to the Christians in the East. He has 5 or 6 rings as testimonials from Eastern monarchs of his services.
Does he wear them?
No, but he is proud of them. He is better pleased with the rewards given to the benefactors of men than to his destroyers.
He's a Quaker, then?
Exactly. He is a Quaker, with the exception of the peculiar dress.
Has he any friends?
Oh, yes. Everyone who knows him is his friend.
But has he any enemies?
One only.
What is his name?
Lord Wilmore.
Where is he?
He is in Paris just now.
Can he give me any details?
Important ones. He was in India with Zaccone.
Do you know his abode?
It is somewhere in the Chaussée d'Antin, but I know neither the street nor the number.
Are you at variance with the Englishman?
I love Zaccone, and he hates him. We are, consequently, not friends.
Do you think the Count of Monte Cristo has ever been in France before?
To that question, I can answer positively, no, sir, he had not, because he applied to me 6 months ago for the details he required, and as I did not know when I might again come to Paris, I recommended Major Cavalcanti to him.
Andrea Cavalcanti?
No, Bartolomeo, his father.
Now, sir, I have but one question more to ask, and I charge you, in the name of honor, of humanity, and of religion, answer me candidly.
What is it, sir?
Do you know with what design Monsieur de Monte Cristo purchased a house at Autiel?
Oh, certainly, for he told me.
What is it, sir?
To make a lunatic asylum of it, similar to that founded by the Count of Pisani at Palermo. Do you know about that institution?
I've heard of it.
It is with a magnificent charity.
Having said this, the abbé bowed to imply he wished to pursue his studies. The visitor either understood the abbé's meaning, or had no more questions to ask. He arose, and the abbé accompanied him to the door. "You are a great almsgiver," said the visitor, "and although you are said to be rich, I will venture to offer you something for your poor people. Will you accept my offering?"
I thank you, sir. I am only jealous in one thing, and that is that the relief I give should be entirely from my own resources. However, my resolution, sir, is unchangeable, but you have only to search for yourself, and you will find, alas, but too many objects upon whom to exercise your benevolence. The abbé once more bowed as he opened the door. The stranger bowed and took his leave, and the carriage conveyed him straight to the house of Villefort. An hour afterwards, the carriage was again ordered, and this time it went to the Rue Fontaine Saint-Georges, and stopped at number 5, where Lord Wilmore lived. The stranger had written to Lord Wilmore requesting an interview, which the latter had fixed for 10 o'clock. As the envoy of the prefect of police arrived 10 minutes before 10, he was told that Lord Wilmore, who was precision and punctuality personified, was not yet come in, but that he would be sure to return as the clock struck. The visitor was introduced into the drawing-room, which was like all other furnished drawing-rooms. A mantelpiece with 2 modern Sèvres vases, a timepiece representing Cupid with his bent bow, a mirror with an engraving on each side, one representing Homer carrying his guide, the other Belisarius begging. A grayish paper, red and black tapestry, such was the appearance of Lord Wilmore's drawing-room. It was illuminated by lamps with ground-glass shades which gave only a feeble light, as if out of consideration for the envoy's weak sight. After 10 minutes' expectation, the clock struck 10. At the 5th stroke, the door opened, and Lord Wilmore appeared. He was rather above the middle height, with thin, reddish whiskers, light complexion and light hair, turning rather gray. He was dressed with all the English peculiarity, namely, in a blue coat, with gilt buttons and a high collar, in the fashion of 1811, a white kerseymere waistcoat, and Nanking pantaloons, 3 inches too short, but which were prevented by straps from slipping up to the knee. His first remark on entering was, "You know, sir, I do not speak French." "I know you do not like to converse in our language," replied the envoy. "But you may use it," replied Lord Wilmore. "I understand it." "And I," replied the visitor, changing his idiom, "know enough of English to keep up the conversation. Do not put yourself to the slightest inconvenience." Said Lord Wilmore, with that tone which is only known to natives of Great Britain. The envoy presented his letter of introduction, which the latter read with English coolness, and having finished, "I understand," said he, "perfectly." Then began the questions, which were similar to those which had been addressed to the Abbé Busoni. But as Lord Wilmore, in the character of the Count's enemy, was less restrained in his answers, they were more numerous. He described the youth of Monte Cristo, who, he said, at 10 years of age, entered the service of one of the petty sovereigns of India who make war on the English. It was there Wilmore had first met him and fought against him, and in that war Zaccone had been taken prisoner, sent to England, and consigned to the hulks, whence he had escaped by swimming. Then began his travels, his duels, his caprices. Then the insurrection in Greece broke out, and he had served in the Grecian ranks. While in that service he had discovered a silver mine in the mountains of Thessaly, but he had been careful to conceal it from everyone. After the battle of Navarino, when the Greek government was consolidated, he asked of King Otho a mining grant for that district, which was given him. Hence that immense fortune, which, in Lord Wilmore's opinion, possibly amounted to 1 or 2 millions per annum, a precarious fortune, which might be momentarily lost by the failure of the mine. "But," said the visitor, "do you know why he came to France?" "He is speculating in railways," said Lord Wilmore, "and, as he is an expert chemist and physicist, he has invented a new system of telegraphy, which he is seeking to bring to perfection." "How much does he spend yearly?" asked the prefect. "No more than 500,000 or 600,000 francs," said Lord Wilmore. "He is a miser." Hatred evidently inspired the Englishman, who, knowing no other reproach to bring on the Count, accused him of avarice. "Do you know his house at Autiel?" "Certainly." "What do you know respecting it?" "Do you wish to know why he bought it?" "Yes." "The Count is a speculator, who will certainly ruin himself in experiments.
He supposes that there is in the neighborhood of the house he has bought a mineral spring equal to those at Bagneres, Luchon, and Cauteretz. He is going to turn his house into a badhouse, as the Germans term it. He has already dug up all the garden 2 or 3 times to find this famous spring, and, being unsuccessful, he will soon purchase all the contiguous houses. Now, as I dislike him, and hope his railway, his electric telegraph, or his search for baths will ruin him, I am watching for his discomfiture, which must soon take place.
What was the cause of your quarrel?
When he was in England, he seduced the wife of one of my friends.
Why do you not seek revenge?
I have already fought 3 duels with him, said the Englishman. The first with the pistol, then with the sword, and finally with the saber.
And what was the result of those duels?
The first time he broke my arm, the second he wounded me in the breast, and the third time he made this large scar.
The Englishman turned down his shirt collar and showed a scar, whose redness proved it to be a recent one.
So that, you see, there is a deadly feud between us.
But, said the envoy, you do not go about it in the right way to kill him, if I understand you correctly.
Said the Englishman. I practice shooting every day, and every other day Grisier comes to my house.
This was all the visitor wished to ascertain, or, rather, all the Englishman appeared to know. The agent arose, and having bowed to Lord Wilmore, who returned his salutation with the stiff politeness of the English, he retired. Lord Wilmore, having heard the door close after him, returned to his bedroom, where, with one hand, he pulled off his light hair, his red whiskers, his false jaw, and his wound, to resume the black hair, dark complexion, and pearly teeth of the Count of Monte Cristo. It was Monsieur de Villefort, and not the prefect, who returned to the house of Villefort. The procureur felt more at ease, although he had learned nothing really satisfactory, and, for the first time since the dinner party at Autiel, he slept soundly. End of chapter 69. Chapter 70. The Ball. It was in the warmest days of July, when in due course of time, the Saturday arrived upon which the ball was to take place at Monsieur de Morcerf's. It was 10 o'clock at night. The branches of the great trees in the garden of the Count's house stood out boldly against the azure canopy of heaven, which was studded with golden stars, but where the last fleeting clouds of a vanishing storm yet lingered. From the apartments on the ground floor might be heard the sound of music, with the whirl of the waltz and gallop, while brilliant streams of light shone through the openings of the Venetian blinds. At this moment, the garden was only occupied by about 10 servants, who had just received orders from their mistress to prepare the supper, the serenity of the weather continuing to increase. Until now, it had been undecided whether the supper should take place in the dining room or under a long tent erected on the lawn, but the beautiful blue sky, studded with stars, had settled the question in favor of the lawn. The gardens were illuminated with colored lanterns according to the Italian custom, and, as is usual in countries where the luxuries of the table, the rarest of all luxuries in their complete form, are well understood, the supper table was loaded with wax lights and flowers. At the time the Countess of Morcerf returned to the rooms, after giving her orders, many guests were arriving, more attracted by the charming hospitality of the Countess than by the distinguished position of the Count, for, owing to the good taste of Mercedes, one was sure of finding some devices at her entertainment worthy of describing, or even copying in case of need. Madame Danglars, in whom the events we have related had caused deep anxiety, had hesitated about going to Madame de Morcerf's, when during the morning her carriage happened to meet that of Villefort. The latter made a sign, and when the carriages had drawn close together, said, "You are going to Madame de Morcerf's, are you not?"
"No," replied Madame Danglars. "I am too ill."
"You are wrong," replied Villefort, significantly. "It is important that you should be seen there."
"Do you think so?" asked the Baroness.
"I do."
"In that case, I will go."
And the 2 carriages passed on towards their different destinations. Madame Danglars therefore came, not only beautiful in person, but radiant with splendor. She entered by one door at the time when Mercedes appeared at the door.
The Countess took Albert to meet Madame Danglars. He approached, paid her some well-merited compliments on her toilette, and offered his arm to conduct her to a seat. Albert looked round him. "You are looking for my daughter?" said the Baroness, smiling.
"I confess it," replied Albert. "Could you have been so cruel as to not bring her?"
"Calm yourself. She was met Mademoiselle de Villefort and has taken her arm. See, they are following us, both in white dresses, one with a bouquet of camellias, the other with one of myosotis. But tell me."
"Well, what do you wish to know?"
"Will not the Count of Monte Cristo be here tonight?"
17, replied Albert.
"What do you mean?"
"I only mean that the Count seems the rage," replied the Viscount, smiling, "and that you are the 17th person that has asked me the same question. The Count is in fashion. I congratulate him upon it."
"And have you replied to everyone as you have to me?"
"Oh, to be sure, I have not answered you. Be satisfied, we shall have this lion. We are among the privileged ones."
"Were you at the opera yesterday?"
"No."
"He was there."
"Indeed. And did the eccentric person commit any new originality?"
"Can he be seen without doing so? Elsler was dancing in Le Diable Boiteau. The Greek princess was in ecstasies. After the cachucha, he placed a magnificent ring on the stem of a bouquet and threw it to the charming danseuse, who, in the third act, to do honor to the gift, reappeared with it on her finger. And the Greek princess, will she be here?"
"No, you will be deprived of that pleasure. Her position in the Count's establishment is not sufficiently understood."
"Wait. Leave me here and go and speak to Madame de Villefort, who is trying to attract your attention." Albert bowed to Madame Danglars and advanced towards Madame de Villefort, whose lips opened as he approached.
"I wager anything," said Albert, interrupting her, "that I know what you are about to say."
"Well, what is it?"
"If I guess rightly, will you confess it?"
"Yes."
"On your honor?"
"On my honor."
"You were going to ask me if the Count had arrived, or was expected."
"Not at all. It is not of him that I am now thinking. I was going to ask you if you had received any news of Monsieur Franz."
"Oh, yes, yesterday."
"What did he tell you?"
"That he was leaving at the same time as his letter."
"Well, now then, the Count?"
"The Count will come, of that you may be satisfied."
"You know that he has another name besides Monte Cristo?"
"No, I did not know it."
"Monte Cristo is the name of an island, and he has a family name."
"I never heard it."
"Well, then, I am better informed than you. His name is Zaccone."
"It is possible."
"He is Maltese."
"That is also possible."
"The son of a ship owner."
"Really, you should relate all this aloud. You would have the greatest success."
"He served in India, discovered a mine in Thessaly, and comes to Paris to establish a mineral water cure at Autiel."
"Well, I'm sure," said Morcerf. "This is indeed news. I am allowed to repeat it?"
"Yes, but cautiously. Tell one thing at a time, and do not say I told you."
"Why so?"
"Because it is a secret just discovered."
"By whom?"
"The police."
"Then the news originated—"
"At the prefect's last night. Paris, you can understand, is astonished at the sight of such unusual splendor, and the police have made inquiries."
"Well, well. Nothing more is wanting than to arrest the Count as a vagabond on the pretext of his being too rich."
"Indeed, that doubtless would have happened if his credentials had not been so favorable."
"The poor Count! And he is aware of the danger he has been in?"
"I think not."
"Then it will be but charitable to inform him. When he arrives, I will not fail to do so."
Just then, a handsome young man with bright eyes, black hair, and glossy mustache respectfully bowed to Madame de Villefort. Albert extended his hand.
"Madame," said Albert, "allow me to present to you Monsieur Maximilien Morel, captain of the Spahis, one of our best, and, above all, of our bravest officers."
"I have already had the pleasure of meeting this gentleman at Autiel, at the house of the Count," replied Madame de Villefort, turning away with marked coldness of manner. This answer, and especially the tone in which it was uttered, chilled the heart of poor Morel. But a recompense was in store for him. Turning around, He saw near the door a beautiful, fair face, whose large blue eyes were, without any marked expression, fixed upon him, while the bouquet of myosotis was gently raised to her lips. The salutation was so well understood that Morel, with the same expression in his eyes, placed his handkerchief to his mouth, and these two living statues, whose hearts beat so violently under their marble aspect, separated from each other by the whole length of the room, forgot themselves for a moment, or rather, forgot the world in their mutual contemplation. They might have remained much longer lost in one another, without anyone noticing their abstraction. The Count of Monte Cristo had just entered. We have already said that there was something in the Count which attracted universal attention whenever he appeared. It was not the coat, unexceptional in its cut, though simple and unornamented. It was not the plain white waistcoat. It was not the trousers that displayed the foot so perfectly formed. It was none of these things that attracted the attention. It was his pale complexion, his waving black hair, his calm and serene expression, his dark and melancholy eye, his mouth, chiseled with such marvelous delicacy, which so easily expressed such high disdain. These were what fixed the attention of all upon him. Many men might have been handsomer, but certainly there could be none whose appearance was more significant, if the expression may be used. Everything about the Count seemed to have its meaning, for the constant habit of thought which he had acquired had given an ease and vigor to the expression of his face, and even to the most trifling gesture, scarcely to be understood. Yet the Parisian world is so strange that even all this might not have won attention had there not been connected with it a mysterious story gilded by an immense fortune. Meanwhile, he advanced through the assemblages of guests under a battery of curious glances towards Madame de Morcerf, who, standing before a mantelpiece ornamented with flowers, had seen his entrance in a looking-glass placed opposite the door. She prepared to receive him. She turned towards him with a serene smile just at the moment he was bowing to her. No doubt she fancied the Count would speak to her, while on his side the Count thought she was about to address him. But both remained silent, and after a mere bow, Monte Cristo directed his steps to Albert, who received him cordially.
"Have you seen my mother?" asked Albert.
"I have just had the pleasure," replied the Count, "but I have not seen your father."
"See, he is down there, talking politics with that little group of great geniuses."
"Indeed," said Monte Cristo. "And so these gentlemen down there are men of great talent. I should not have guessed it. And for what kind of talent are they celebrated? You know there are different sorts."
"That tall, harsh-looking man is very learned. He discovered, in the neighborhood of Rome, a kind of lizard with a vertebra more than lizards usually have, and he immediately laid his discovery before the Institute. The thing was discussed for a long time, but finally decided in his favor. I can assure you the vertebra made a great noise in the learned world, and the gentleman, who was only a knight of the Legion of Honor, was made an officer."
"Come," said Monte Cristo, "this cross seems to me to be wisely awarded. I suppose, had he found another additional vertebra, they would have made him a commander."
"Very likely," said Albert.
"And who can that person be who has taken it into his head to wrap himself up in a blue coat embroidered with green?"
"Ah, that coat is not his own idea. It is the Republic's, which deputed David to devise a uniform for the academicians."
"Indeed?" said Monte Cristo. "So this gentleman is an academician?"
"Within the last week he has been made one of the learned assembly."
"And what is his special talent?"
"His talent? I believe he thrusts pins through the heads of rabbits, he makes fowls eat matter, and punches the spinal marrow out of dogs with whalebone."
"And he is made a member of the Academy of Sciences for this?"
"Oh, no, of the French Academy."
"But what has the French Academy to do with all this?"
"I was going to tell you. It seems—"
"That his experiments have very considerably advanced the cause of science, doubtless?"
"No, that his style of writing is very good."
"This must be very flattering to the feelings of the rabbits into whose heads he has thrust pins, to the fowls whose bones he has dyed red, and to the dogs whose spinal marrow he has punched out?" Albert laughed. "And the other one?" demanded the Count.
"That one?"
"Yes, the third."
"The one in the dark blue coat?"
"Yes."
"He is a colleague of the Count, and one of the most active opponents to the idea of providing the Chamber of Peers with a uniform. He was very successful upon that question.
He stood badly with the liberal papers, but his noble opposition to the wishes of the court is now getting him into favor with the journalists. They talk of making him an ambassador.
And what are his claims to the peerage?
He has composed 2 or 3 comic operas, written 4 or 5 articles in the Siècle, and voted 5 or 6 years on the ministerial side.
Bravo, Viscount, said Monte Cristo, smiling. You are a delightful cicerone. And now you will do me a favor, will you not?
What is it?
Do not introduce me to any of these gentlemen, and should they wish it, you will warn me. Just then the Count felt his arm pressed. He turned round. It was Danglars.
"Ah, is it you, Baron?" said he.
"Why do you call me Baron?" said Danglars. "You know that I care nothing for my title. I am not like you, Viscount. You like your title, do you not?"
"Certainly," replied Albert,
"seeing that without my title I should be nothing, while you, sacrificing the Baron, would still remain the millionaire."
"Which seems to me the finest title under the royalty of July," replied Danglars. "Unfortunately," said Monte Cristo, "one's title to a millionaire does not last for life, like that of Baron, peer of France, or academician. For example, the millionaires Frank and Pullman of Frankfurt, who have just become bankrupts." "Indeed?" said Danglars, becoming pale. "Yes, I received the news this evening by a courier. I had about 1 million in their hands, but warned in time, I withdrew it a month ago." "Oh, mon Dieu!" exclaimed Danglars. "They have drawn on me for 200,000 francs.
"Well, you can throw out the draft. Their signature is worth 5%.
"Yes, but it is too late," said Danglars. "I have honored their bills."
"Then," said Monte Cristo, "here are 200,000 francs gone after—"
"Hush, do not mention these things," said Danglars.
Then, approaching Monte Cristo, he added,
"Especially before a young Monsieur Cavalcanti."
After which he smiled and turned towards the young man in question. Albert had left the Count to speak to his mother, Danglars to converse with young Cavalcanti. Monte Cristo was, for an instant, alone. Meanwhile, the heat became excessive. The footmen were hastening through the rooms with waiters loaded with ice. Monte Cristo wiped the perspiration from his forehead, but drew back when the waiter was presented to him. He took no refreshment. Madame de Morcerf did not lose sight of Monte Cristo. She saw that he took nothing, and even noticed his gesture of refusal.
"Albert," she asked, "did you notice that?"
"What, mother?"
"That the Count has never been willing to partake of food under the roof of Morcerf."
"Yes, but then he breakfasted with me. Indeed, he made his first appearance in the world on that occasion."
"But your house is not our house," murmured Mercédès. "And since he has been here, I have watched him."
"Well?"
"Well, he has taken nothing yet."
"The Count is very temperate."
Mercédès smiled sadly. "Approach him," said she, "and when the next waiter passes, insist upon his taking something."
"But why, mother?"
"Just to please me, Albert," said Mercédès.
Albert kissed his mother's hand and drew near the Count. Another salver passed, loaded like the preceding one. She saw Albert attempt to persuade the Count, but he obstinately refused. Albert rejoined his mother. She was very pale.
"Well," said she, "you see he refuses you?"
"Yes, but why need this annoy you?"
"You know, Albert, women are particular creatures. I should like to have seen the Count take something in my house, if only an ice. Perhaps he cannot reconcile himself to the French style of living, and might prefer something else."
"Oh, no. I have seen him eat of everything in Italy. No doubt he does not feel inclined this evening."
"And besides," said the Countess, "accustomed as he is to burning climates, possibly he does not feel the heat as we do."
"I do not think that, for he has complained of feeling almost suffocated, and asked why the Venetian blinds were not opened as well as the windows."
"In a word," said Mercédès, "it was a way of assuring me that his abstinence was intended."
And she left the room. A minute afterwards, the blinds were thrown open, and through the jessamine and clematis that overhung the window, one could see the garden ornamented with lanterns, and the supper laid under the tent. Dancers, players, talkers, all uttered an exclamation of joy. Everyone inhaled with delight the breeze that floated in. At the same time, Mercédès reappeared, paler than before, but with that imperturbable expression of countenance which she sometimes wore.
She went straight to the group of which her husband formed the center.
"Do not detain these gentlemen here. They would prefer, I should think, to breathe in the garden rather than suffocate here, since they are not playing."
"Ah," said a gallant old general, who, in 1809, had sung Partant pour la Syrie. "We'll not go alone to the garden."
"Then," said Mercedes, "I will lead the way."
Turning towards Monte Cristo, she added,
"Count, will you oblige me with your arm?"
The Count almost staggered at these simple words. Then he fixed his eyes on Mercedes. It was only a momentary glance, but it seemed to the Countess to have lasted for a century, so much was expressed in that one look. He offered his arm to the Countess. She took it, or rather, just touched it with her little hand, and they together descended the steps, lined with rhododendrons and camellias. Behind them, by another outlet, a group of about 20 persons rushed into the garden with loud exclamations of delight. End of chapter 70.
And cut. That's a wrap, folks. Thanks for listening to today's episode of I've Been Meaning to Read That, with me, your host, Dan. If you want to learn more about the show, you can follow us on Instagram at Meaning to Read and TikTok at I've Been Meaning. If you want to support the show to help keep it going, you can find me on Venmo at Dingus Donut, DINGUSDONUT. Supporters get a shout-out on the show, and even more important, get to vote on the next book that we read. No matter what, I'll see you for our next episode. Until then, read those books you've been meaning to read, and have a lovely, lovely day.